Hello, hello. So my name is Isabel Renteria. I'm a second year medical student at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. And I'm here with Karrie today. She has agreed to do this interview for the Voices for Recovery Community Health Engagement Project. And Karrie, can I have you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, everybody. I'm Karrie, and I'm an alcoholic.
Thank you so much for being here, Karrie. Just to start off, do you mind sharing a couple of things about yourself? This could be your hobbies, anything that you're doing fun this weekend, anything to help us get to know you.
Sure. I'm 61 years old. I am a newly transplanted woman to Tucson, Arizona. I always think about, came from Chicago, Illinois, and I was born there, raised there. And the weather just got to be a little bit too much for me physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so I relocated here in 2016. And I feel better. And, I've introduced a few things into my movement regime, and one of them is hiking. So I'm still definitely a novice because, I'm a little bit older, a little bit thicker, but I am still getting out there, and, it's great weather to be able to hike year round here. So yeah, that's my newest hobby.
Oh, wonderful. It's the dead of winter here in Wisconsin, so I wouldn't mind doing that as well. That sounds pretty nice right now. So, Karrie, do you mind telling us why you agreed to do this interview today?
Well, lots of reasons. I think for me, it's really important that people understand, for me, what Alcoholics Anonymous is and what we do. And I think in the general public, there is a misperception of, kind of who we are. So I just came off of a 2-year rotation being the chairperson for Alcoholics Anonymous in public information. So, and my sister organization, and we had our meetings all at the same time, was working with health professionals. And so it was a program that took us quite a long time to actually get launched. I mean, we've tried a lot of things. We tried to meet doctors and lawyers and judges once they were already licensed and involved in their profession. But about 2 years ago, we decided to start working with residents in their second year of residency. And we actually became part of the curriculum at the University of Arizona. So we just launched right at about the same time I was asked to talk to you. So we launched this program where we physically, personally mentor a second year resident medical school student. So we take them, we make contact with them, we answer any questions that they might have, we give them information about Alcoholics Anonymous and maybe the 12 steps. And then we take them to an open meeting. So they come to a meeting with us. Then after the meeting, we debrief and again, answer any questions. So it was my first personal experience with it was transformative. I worked with this medical student and I said, well, what do you know about Alcoholics Anonymous? And she said, I know that it's kind of a spiritual program, and it has 12 steps, and it works. Like that for her was perfect, and then we talked a little bit about what she could expect at an open meeting. And then we scheduled a time. I met her there like 15 minutes before. I gave her just a ton of information, including in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, there's an entire chapter at the beginning, and it's called The Doctor's Opinion. And it was written by one of our co-founders, doctor. And he was a foremost expert in 1935 in alcoholism. And he's the first doctor that actually started planting the seeds that what we suffer from is actually a disease, and that our physiology reacts in the same way like an allergy does. The only difference is we don't get hives. And so he writes about that in the first chapters of that big book, and it's called The Doctor's Opinion. And so I gave her that because I thought it would be kind of interest to another doctor, what a doctor says about what it is that alcoholism is all about and how it manifests itself in our bodies.
Wow, that is incredible. Thank you for everything that you do. I just attended my first open meeting this semester. So I'm just learning myself, but it seems like amazing, amazing work. So really thank you for all of that. Do you mind sharing your own personal journey with us?
Sure. Well, I originally got sober when I was 29 years old. My children were small, and I had gotten to the point where I couldn't not drink. Every single day, that compulsion and how that allergy manifests itself, just I couldn't stop drinking once I started, and I couldn't not drink the following morning. They call it in that doctor's opinion, the phenomenon of craving. So, we can't just not drink. And so I was 29 years old, and my children were small, and I was a stay-at-home mom. And I think for me, that particular trigger of loneliness, because up to that point I had been working, my career was going really good, I was earning an income, I got married, had kids, and then all of a sudden there was like nothing. And so I think for me, that triggered in me a lot of questions about my self-worth and, things like that. But I think really the loneliness, and that's what I know. And that's good information for me because, like I mentioned earlier, I had moved from Illinois, which is really where all my family is, to Tucson, Arizona. And, knowing that my trigger is loneliness, it afforded me the opportunity to really, get planted into the recovery movement that is here in Arizona. So I didn't have to wait. But in any case, so I got sober. I remember there was like some dialogue, with my parents. My parents said, "Oh, we think you have a drinking problem." And my husband, who is a normal drinker, he just said, "Well, like, what are we going to do?" And so I called the 1-800-AA phone number, which most regional places have that. It's really an answering service, but it's manned by people in recovery. We have one here in Arizona as well. So I call it 1-800-AA. So I called, and he said, "Well, here's what we need you to do. We need you to go to this open meeting, which was at a hospital." And he said, "I want you to promise me two things. One, that you'll go. And two, that when they ask if this is anybody's first meeting, that you raise your hand, and that's it." He goes, "That's how we, those other people that kind of hang out in meetings, that's how we know, that you're a newcomer." And so I did that. That was a Monday morning, and I walked into that open meeting, and he was right. There was like 200 people there. And, I did exactly that. And I'm grateful that I didn't have to speak my name, because it's a really emotional process. And I would never have been able to get my name out of my mouth. I mean, I was sobbing, but I did raise my hand. And those folks that came up to me started me on that journey. Now they had recommended back in the day, our rehab was 90 days. But this happened to be August and my kids were home. And I said, I just can't do that. I just can't, it has to be another way, because I won't do this if you're going to send me away for a 90-day treatment. My family's been through enough. And so they said, okay, well, will you do 90 meetings in 90 days? So we call that 90 and 90. And I agreed to that and basically went to a meeting every single day for probably 3 years. Once my youngest went off to school, then I got back into the work routine and going to work full time. And I continued to stay sober for the next 17 years. Now, this is just my story. It doesn't have to be everybody's story. One thing I know is that we all look different. We all come in with different ideas, but one thing that is not different is the compulsion to drink. So, that is totally the one thing that connects all of us is, when we say we're alcoholic, that's really truly what we're talking about, is the fact that we cannot stop drinking once we have started. So it's the first drink that takes you down. And I continued and, I moved and climbed the corporate ladder and became successful in my own career pursuits, and, everything was falling into place. But right around year 10, we moved to a new city, still in Illinois, and certainly not that far, but, it wasn't my home team. And so I was forced to start looking at new meetings. And of course, they weren't like the meetings I came from, even though we're only talking about a 30-minute drive. And so I started to go to less and less and less meetings. That started in year 10. My sponsor got married and I just never replaced her. So now I have less and less meetings and no true working of the steps, because I don't really have a connection to a sponsor anymore. And then I was telling you already about my aunt, and she passed away in 2007. And she was my person. She was like my sister. She was 6 years older than me. She's the one that taught me how to put lipstick on and, coached me through my first date and, taught me how to be a functioning woman. Anyway, she was my person, and she died of melanoma, and she was only in her 40s. And so, yeah, I made it through the process, her transition. I picked out the dress for her casket. I even did a eulogy. I did all of that sober. But then about 6 weeks later, at the end of August, I drank again. So I picked up on August 15th, I picked up my 17-year chip. And then on August 30th, I drank again. And I can't really even tell you why. I just had this thought, and it said, look, you did the hardest thing you ever had to do in your life, and you did it sober. Maybe you're not an alcoholic. And so, yeah. And then I drank for another 2.5 years. So, everything the book says is true and accurate. I was right back where I was when I left off 17 years earlier. Really, truly, the only difference is that our fellowship looks at time as your crowning achievement, because it's an anonymous society. So as a result of that, we don't know who the doctors are, any of that. So we don't know those that are rich or those that are poor or those that are homeless. We don't know those things about each other. All we know is that what connects us is the inability to stay stopped from alcohol. And so when I went back into recovery, I had a lot more baggage than I did at the age of 29. I had a lot of shame. and a lot of regret. I mean, I consider myself a type A personality, and I just don't fail. I just don't fail at anything. But I considered drinking again as one of the greatest failures. Um, Now, of course, I see it differently. But, back then it was a really hard, difficult process to get back into Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, but, and my husband, he was wonderful and kind, just like he always has been. We've been married 35 years. We have 2 daughters, 2 grandchildren. Um, and and I remember that day, I had like all these little tiny wine bottles. So I would take a big wine bottle and I would fill it into little tiny wine bottles. That's the insanity, right? The first step talks about unmanageability, and then the second step talks about the insanity. That to me is insane, you know, and then you keep them, right? I kept all those little bottles in my purse. So anyway, my husband, the night before, had put his reading glasses. He just kind of threw them in my purse, and it was Sunday morning, and he was digging through my purse looking for his reading glasses so he could read the Sunday paper. And he came across all these little empty bottles, and he put them on our hall table, just kind of like in alignment, so that the minute I came down the stairs, I saw the wine bottles. And for me, it was perfect. He didn't have to threaten or anything. He wasn't even mad. He just said, you know what to do and you know where to go. And I trust that when you're ready, you will do it. So, and basically the very next day, that was Sunday, and same type of thing. The very next day, Monday morning, I was back in Alcoholics Anonymous. However, I was convinced that I was going to do everything different. So I got a sponsor right away, and the sponsor said, what are you willing to do different? And I said, everything. And, what started out to be like a really difficult journey, I think has ended in me seeing my relapse as really, truly a gift, and, a miracle, because I could have continued going on the way I was going and then had even more sobriety, maybe 25 years or 32 years, and drank again when just the right combination of things hit. So, for me, when I came back and I started doing everything different than what I had in the previous experience, I was able to start to reframe and process, and that journey has continued. So my sobriety date is October 30th, 2010. So I've been back 11 years, and I remember that sponsor telling me, your story and what you have to share can save so many more people's lives than anything. And you will eventually see that your story is truly a gift, because you'll be able to save maybe somebody that's starting to eliminate meetings, or, from actually experiencing a relapse. So yeah, I'm grateful. And she was absolutely 100% accurate. I can't tell you when I share it, which is really quite often. I think that, yes, absolutely. I save a lot of people, and I have had many, many people come up to me during a meeting and after a meeting and say, you know what, like, I'm going to get recommitted, because I see that what I've been doing is just making me squirrely and that much closer to drinking. So basically, that's my story. I have a love of Alcoholics Anonymous today that I never ever had before. I have a sponsor. I sponsor other women. I work the steps continually. Like it says, you practice these in all your affairs. I have a daily conscious contact with my higher power, which for me, I do call God. And I get to meet lots of really cool people and very active. And I said, when I retire, which is in the next few years, I want to do AA. I want to do AA full time. I want to, there's just so many things that I would love to try that I, because of time, haven't been able to do. So yeah, it's an amazing life I get to lead.
It's incredible. That it's such an inspiring story, and I know that you're going to change lives. I'm sure that you have already. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm.
I know that you mentioned kind of briefly that you touch base with your higher power, and for you, that's God. So one of the objectives of this project overall, not necessarily this interview, but the project, is to better understand how people's cultures can play a role in their journey and in their sobriety. Do you mind sharing with us what role your cultures, your values, your family, your customs have kind of played throughout your journey?
Well, I think, and this has been kind of recent. So I was raised Catholic. I'm so very Catholic. I went to Catholic schools. Even when I had children, they went to Catholic schools. I was the PTA president and the board of, or on the board as their chairperson. I mean, I was very, very committed to my Catholic religion. When I first got sober at 29, I started to see that my belief system wasn't entirely connected and in alignment with Catholicism. I continue to do that because I think for me, the journey to personal growth really started for me at 29, and I had to ask those really difficult questions like, who am I really? Over and above, being a recovering woman and being a mother, being a wife, being a daughter, like really, truly, who am I? What is it that I believe? And I think for me, so, one of the reasons why I drank again after my aunt's passing was because I got very angry with God, very angry. And it took me the last 11 years to truly process, like, again, what does that mean to me? It's one thing I know that I have a belief that, my higher power, my relationship with my higher power, that my higher power is okay with that. My higher power is okay if I, say, um, if I say, you know what, I'm really mad at you right now. You just totally, but the actual expression of religion into my psyche, um, really, that was always where I stopped. Right. So I had an okay relationship with God, but I always felt like it was punitive. Like I had to show up a certain way. Um, that's culturally that whole, when you're good, you go to heaven. When you're bad, you go to hell. And, here's the problem with that thinking is I always considered myself a good girl. Like, I've done, yeah, okay, so I'm an alcoholic. That is not make me a bad person. I never went to jail. I never beat my kids. I never sold drugs. I mean, like all of these things that societally we say, oh, well, those are not good choices, or that makes you bad if you're this, that, or the other. I'm not a murderer. So I always considered myself good. And then when God took my aunt, it felt very punitive, especially because I had 17 years of sobriety in a family that only knew alcoholism as an acute disease, never any recovery. And so I was like, you know what? I took one for the team on this. And I'm still, in a situation where I'm being punished. And that's really truly how I felt. It took a long time in this 11 years of sobriety to process that. And I had to get to that point in time where I realized that I had expectations, right? And so, one of the things we learn in through our inventory, which is step 4, is like what our character defects are. And I knew that I have expectations. I have expectations of people, places, and things. And of course, I have expectations of God, right? And so I felt that because I am a good girl, because I've always followed the rules, that I deserved a miracle. And when that did not happen for me, that's why I was mad. So, I've kind of shifted a little bit in that I'm not nearly as religious as what I have been before, but I feel like I am way more spiritually connected to the God of my understanding, and I can't do the third step, which is, turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand him. Like, I can't do that unless I can trust that God's not going to punish me for something. And so, I was always hung up on the trust factor of step 3. Now I do have that trust factor, and I do have a faith that works within all situations. And I can't even tell you how many times within the last year I've said, like, okay, so if this isn't for me, like if I'm not supposed to be doing this, like show me the way, right? Show me what your will is for me today. And and it's been working. And it's interesting because I've always been a realtor, and now I'm my own broker, and I was doing that since 2005, and very successful. And I came here, and I'm still successful, but I'm just like I'm missing that passion piece. And so I decided to, and this was at the suggestion of a Tucson interventionist. And she's like, you know what, you really need to be a recovery specialist. You really need to look into it. And I was like, well, okay, but I'm 61. Like, why would I take on a new career now? Go back to school, and in this framework, I was like, okay, I'll check it out. So I looked online to the company that she had suggested, and they were still doing Zoom classes. It was going to be the last Zoom class. It was October, November, and December, last Zoom classes. So I looked online and I said, I'm going to take it. I'm going to do it. What else am I doing? October, it's like, we're still like kind of crazy with COVID. And I got the very last seat. Oh. Right. And so like, that is like what I tell my daughters, like when life unfolds like that, like a red carpet, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. In AA, we call that doing God's will. So, and that's exactly how it was, getting the last spot in the last, classwork, showing up with a bunch of young adults that are much closer to your age than my age. But yet I saw that every single thing that I've ever done, every experience that I've had, everything, right down to, leading companies and interacting with other people and professionals and record keeping, like all of it really led me to this exact path of being a certified recovery coach. And actually that's where I'm Zooming to you from. Oh. I'm at the bedroom, my space, at a client's house. And, it just feels really right. It feels really right to, offer the keys to the kingdom, to another woman who's seeking recovery that maybe just needs a little hand up. That's it, just a little hand up. So, yeah, and that's what I mean by I've moved from a religious experience into a personal partnership with the God of my understanding. And because I trust that I'm, loved, and that, this is going to be what it is going to be. And, God wants me to do this. And so culturally, like, that's been my experience. Now, we don't say that you have to have a God. We have tons and tons of people that get recovery and have no God. They're atheist, agnostic, Muslim. I mean, we don't say what your God needs to look like. You get to say that. And truly, that's been since the inception of our 12 steps, from the very inception. The third man that, or actually it was the second man that got recovery in Brooklyn. He was an atheist. And so, we had Dr. Bob, one of our co-founders, who was, his wife every single morning would read to them at breakfast out of the Bible. And so it would be real like scripture. Well, from that launched our prayer and meditation, right? And that improves our conscious contact with the God of our understanding, right? And so, like, all of these little tiny threads, kind of intersect and kind of blend around. So our co-founders, they originally were working only 6 precepts of the Oxford group. So the Oxford group was a religious organization. And the reason we actually got thrown out, what are you going to do? But they were really putting our feet to the fire, and they wanted the first 100 men to testify in church that it was God that relieved them of their compulsion to drink. Well, that would be a problem for lots of people. One, if you had a business and you didn't want to testify that you were relieved of your compulsion, or if you didn't believe that God is the one that relieved you, right? So, once we got kicked out and we were forced to write the 12 steps, I think really, truly, with the help of divine intervention, they became a little bit more solidified. And it was that person's voice that made the God of your understanding, right? And when you look at the history, when Bill W. got, 12-stepped, I guess, for lack of a better term, but when Ebby Thatcher came to his house and Bill was still drinking, and the Dr. Silkworth, told Lois, Bill's wife, that there's no hope. Like, he's going to die of what we now know as wet brain, or he's going to have to be institutionalized because his brain is like going to be so far gone. So when Ebby came and told him that, Bill was an agnostic. And, Ebby said, Bill, just start with where you're at, right? So just start with the God you understand today. And I took that to heart when I was moving into my own spiritual experience, right? So I just started with what I did know, right? So what is it that I do know that, and then just kept, revealing more things, and so, yes, my God started out as punitive. But then, I came to the realization with things that I was reading, and I watched a program called The Shack, and I realized that, God cries. God cries when we're hurting. God cries when all of us are hurting. Even those that our society deems as bad, God still cries, right? So, God doesn't do it. Like, we do those things. So, and that was basically my process.
That's wonderful. Um, it seems like AA and the 12 steps have obviously been a huge resource for you. What other resources or places could you recommend to people who are just starting out or maybe who are starting over?
Well, there's several recovery avenues. There is like something called Celebrate Recovery. So Celebrate Recovery is it's 12-step based, but is really truly entrenched in a Christian format. It's so those types of programs, so that would be one resource for someone that is a little bit more fundamental in their Christian belief system, and still offers the benefit of the 12 steps of recovery. So there's that. There is something called Refuge, which is a Buddhist based system. It is based on like a central focus. Like I have the power within me to move through this recovery journey into healing, and it uses meditation. So if you look at like their process as like spokes in a wheel, right? So you have spokes in the wheel, and then at the very center is, you as a person. And then each one of the spokes represents a different healing process. And then you use these spokes in which to gain recovery. So there's that, and then of course we have, Alcoholics Anonymous is everywhere. And, which is a good thing because there's no place you can go on the planet, not any cruise ship, not any private island. You will find Alcoholics Anonymous there. And we have meetings that are specifically focused and designed for those that are atheist and agnostic. We have, LGBT meetings. We have women only, we have men only, especially I think here in the United States, because, this is where Alcoholics Anonymous was founded, like in the heartland of Akron, Ohio. So, I think there is probably other places in the world. Like I know Ireland, I talked to a lady one time, she was sitting next to me and she was saying that they don't have women's meetings in Ireland, that they don't approve, they don't say. And I can't imagine not having a women's meeting. I mean, I like women's meetings because, women and men, we have different love language. So, it's easier to connect. Plus, women are our tribe for another woman, and same thing with the man, so nothing else gets complicated by an interconnectedness. So, yeah, so those are the ones that I can think of kind of off the top of my head. Of course, you have all kinds of rehab, you have, halfway houses, you have Bridge the Gap from transitioning from one of those facilities into meetings every day. We have connectedness in prison systems, where we actually have volunteers take meetings into prisons, so really there's nothing. If you're looking for the right type of fit, there's tons and tons of those kinds of resources. And really, truly, Alcoholics Anonymous, we're not recovery, right? We're not treatment, I should say. We're not treatment, we're recovery. So, we don't have an opinion about what type of treatment or where you should go for treatment or, any of those kinds of things. But we do have, all the tools at our disposal for a recovery. And then, it's vital if you want long-term recovery to give it back. So, that's where we have like a hierarchy and lots of opportunities for people to be of service and, those kinds of things.
Amazing. Yeah, so there's
Mhm.
something for everyone.
Oh, yeah.
What advice would you have for somebody who's just starting out or um, kind of in a low place? Somebody maybe who's starting over.
Um, you know what? I think it would be just to take a deep breath and push past the fear. Because whether you're walking into a meeting and you have 10 hours of sobriety, or you're walking into a meeting having relapsed and have 10 hours of sobriety, you still have to call upon that strength, that courage in which to walk through the threshold of any place, of a meeting, of an AA club, of picking up the phone and reaching out. I mean, whatever the scenario may be, it requires just a teeny bit of sobriety, um, warriordom, and that serves us well because you can make a fear grow to the point where it's insurmountable, right? Or you can keep the fear manageable and do it anyway. And then, there are people that are always going to be there to help. Always, always. You don't even need to raise your hand anymore in a meeting. What if you've been going to the meeting, you will know who a newcomer is. If there's a certain look that a newcomer has, and usually sometimes is crying, is shaking, or it is like this deer in the headlights fear, like don't talk to me, and you know, there's that's just what we do. That's all we need, really, is that type of look to give ourselves permission to reach out, introduce ourselves. We have greeters. Most meetings have greeters. So a greeter is just a person that greets you at the door, and they will personally ask you. It's a service position, and they will ask you, is this your first time here? Yeah. Is this your first meeting ever in life? Yeah. Awesome. Let me introduce you around. Let me tell you kind of what's going to happen, so that maybe you make you a little bit more comfortable. You don't have to share, and you certainly don't have to share that you're an alcoholic until you know that you are. Right. And so just take it at your pace. So, yeah, that would be my advice. Don't let the fear stop you from um, truly living the life that you deserve.
What advice do you have for healthcare providers or for doctors, med students that are going to become healthcare providers?
I would say reach out to your local AA groups, because again, public information and cooperation with the professional community, this is their job. This is what they sign on for, is getting the information into the hands of people, our frontline people that see mental illness in conjunction to any of the other isms that are out there, substance use disorder, and be educated. Because I think really, truly, my intern, that's what was transformative for her, is she went to a meeting, she didn't speak. She didn't do anything. I answered all her questions. And then when I asked her, like, what did you learn? And she said, what I learned is, um, because I now have the experience of what an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting looks like, I won't be afraid to say, what, instead of saying, do you think you have a drinking problem? Because we know the answer to that. There's not an alcoholic on the planet that's going to say, oh, I do. They're all going to say no. And they're going to minimize how many drinks they've had. And they're going to make tons and tons of excuses as to why their behavior is so out of character. And she says, I won't do that now. I will simply say to them, listen, there's a program here that I think you might want to take advantage of. It's called Alcoholics Anonymous. And here, call this number. You can call my friend Karrie. I went to a meeting and actually it was amazing. And they were so welcoming and so loving. And I didn't need to be afraid, And so, call this girl Karrie, she'll take care of you. Right.
Right.
So I
Absolutely.
think, right, that is, yeah, that would be my experience to healthcare professionals. We're not treatments, we're recovery. So, we don't have an opinion. We never put down any of the other things that support doctors in doing their job, whether it be Vivitrol shots or antabuse pills or anything in between. We'll say, well, that's between you and your doctor. But let's start working on some other things that we know work as well, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. So,
Fantastic.
mhm.
Yeah. So thinking ahead, what goals do you have personally for the future?
Like I said, I'm 61 pretty soon here. I'm going to be 62. When I retire, I want to just get way more involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we have a hierarchy that we make all decisions from the bottom up. So unlike corporate America that makes decisions at the top down for the masses, well, we make all our decisions from the bottom up. And so we do have a process. It just takes a very long time. So, we do it with diligence, and we do it with what we call a group conscience, which we believe that God speaks through the group conscience. And so when we have a majority rule on anything, then that becomes our group's vote. So every home group, once it's your home group, you have a vote there, and then every home group takes those votes back up. So I'd like to do more of that type of thing. We're looking to put together our 5th edition of our big book to make it a little bit more. Our last, our last book was written, I think, in the 70s.
Okay.
So we only have had 4 editions. Lots has changed, right? We had the advent, really, and the embracement of the internet, Facebook, Twitter, and all the rest. And so, we have to do some business type work related to that as far as our traditions and the tradition of anonymity. So we have to make some changes there. And we'd like to put more stories in that are, current. So I've often thought that I might want to submit a story for the 5th edition of the big book. So we'll see. I'm not really a writer, but there's also no way I could tell my own story wrong. So
And you have an amazing story to tell.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Do you have any words of wisdom for anyone out there that you want to close with?
Yeah, I think our book, its basic text is 164 pages. And that very last chapter is called A Vision for You. I think, my parting words of wisdom, if I could ever have embraced what that vision would have looked like, like what truly who I am, seeing myself through the eyes of my higher power, I would have probably made a lot less mistakes, because I would have always felt worthy, and I would have always felt deserving, and I would have always felt loved. So, that would be my parting words is, my vision for you and anyone watching this video is that you see yourself through the eyes of your own higher power with the same love and respect that God has for us. So that's it.